board. Correct. All right, so this is like how to make worlds, how to use worlds for your games. I use worlds, and I have used worlds for pretty much my entire time of doing logic games. Like I kind of briefly explained before, it's spending more time in the beginning, spending less time on the questions. And in fact, because I'm spending less time on the questions, I'm actually like 110% on my answer choices. So when I pick an answer choice, if it's A, technically I could go A, move on to the next question. That causes me some anxiety. So I generally look at all of the questions or all the answer choices, but theoretically you could, if you felt confident in yourself with your setup, you could pick the answer choice and move on. This is one of those sections in the test where you don't necessarily have to look at all the correct or all of your answer choices because it's very mathematical. The correct answer choice is a correct answer choice. So if you see it there, it's going to be your correct answer. Yes. So how we build worlds is we go through and eliminate the rules. And the way that we eliminate our rules is we start creating different worlds, different scenarios to eliminate the rule. So we'll go over it with our first question, or our first rule, but that's generally what we do. And we usually come up with, again, this is not restrictive and applies to every game, but generally you have like 6 to 8 worlds, depending on the difficulty of the game. So I have 6 to 8 worlds to go off of in my questions, which helps me get them done within like 15 seconds. So I do try to make this interactive, so feel free to like unmute yourself, turn on your camera, whatever you want to do. Interrupt me whenever you want to. It's a small class, so it's not like I'm teaching to 20 people. But yeah, we'll get started. So we have a teacher will assign to each of 3 students. We have G, R, and W, 1 or more presentations, and each presentation will be on exactly one of 3 subjects. We have M, J, and S. There will be at least 1 presentation on each subject, and then we have our following constraints. So given the setup or given the paragraph that we have, I think there's a couple ways that you can go for our setup. This is a pretty basic grouping game because we're going to be grouping our variables into the certain groups. We're not ordering anything. It's not like we have to figure out who's presenting first or anything. It's just grouping. This is a little bit different because we have repeated variables or the potential for repeated variables. We know that we have to have each presentation happening at least once, and we know that these 3 students are going to have at least 1 presentation, but it's opening the door that we could have multiple presentations or multiple people, well, I guess same thing, people doing the same presentations basically. So because it says 1 or more, at least 1 presentation, we could repeat both of these variables. So it makes it a little bit difficult in that sense. I did this game about 2 different ways, using your people as your groups and using your topics as your groups. I think you could go either way. I don't think it really matters. When I did this, I initially read it as my people are, did I do my people are my groups? I think I did my people are my groups. Yeah, first off, I did my people as my groups, and I thought that was a little bit easier for me to read rather than my topics as my groups. I think this is one of those games where I would repeat it at least twice and try both of them. So people as groups or topics as groups, because you can see what maybe clicks more for you. There's no right or wrong way, thankfully. So we're going to go with our people or our groups. So that way, once we kind of get who is doing what topic, it's a little bit easier for us to see that G is doing M and J, or G and R are both doing M. It's a little bit easier to read in my opinion. But like I said, you could do either way. So we have our groups of G, R, and W. And like the paragraph said, they're going to be doing at least 1 presentation. When it's giving me that minimum, or if it gave me a maximum or a certain amount, I'm going to put lines underneath my groups. So that way I'm reminded that something has to go there. So if I ended up with I don't know, G and R having M and J in there. I know that W would have to have someone, and I'd probably put S in there because I have to have them happening at least once. But those lines are good indications of kind of like visual reminders of who needs to go where or what I have left over. It's really helpful for floaters too, if we had any floaters, which we don't really have much in this game. So any questions on the setup? Otherwise, I'm going to start jumping into our rules. Okay.
Real quick, if
Oh.
let's say it wasn't even, let's say there was more people, or if there was like more subjects to get a presentation on, what, how would you like decide which one to use for the grouping?
Generally, groupings are going to be less, like your variables that are happening less. So if I had more topics, like P and Q or something, I would still stick with G, R, and W as my groups because you have less groups to go into. If I had more people, let's say I have M, P, well, M wouldn't really work, but let's say I have like A, B, and C, I would then switch to my topics just because there's less of them. And it's easier to group things into groups with less groups. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, this one's a little like unique because we have the exact amount on both topics, both variables, which I think is kind of why it doesn't really matter which one you use. Well, I guess it's just that you could use whatever group you want. It's just easier using the smaller amount as your groups. Yeah. Okay. First rule says that if G presents on J, then so does R. What are our thoughts with our first rule? It can be how you would write it out. Question about the first rule. What are our initial thoughts?
I kind of wrote the rule out as like G with and then J on the bottom and then like an arrow in RJ to kind of like know if G has J, then Rita will have it too.
Yeah, I like that. This is how I would write rules out. I like how you wrote it like this because this is kind of how our diagram is. It's a lot easier to implement your rules or to like connect with your rules when it's written the same way that your diagram is written. So it's a lot easier for me to picture J under G because that's how I've got them situated. So I like that. And then yes, this is perfect. If we have J under G, we're going to have J under R as well. Okay. These kinds of rules trick a lot of people up because a lot of people automatically want to do like the contrapositive or automatically think, well, then G has to have J in it. And that's not the case. And I hate contrapositives and I will never use contrapositives in logic games. You don't really need them. So in this situation where we have an if then statement, I'm not going to use a contrapositive. I'm not going to do anything fancy like that. I'm thinking about, is the rule being applied or is it not being applied? Because the only time where this rule applies is if G has J under it. So my two options are G is presenting J or G is not presenting J. So because I have two options, I'm going to create two worlds. One where G is presenting J and one where G is not presenting J. And the reason why I do that is because then I can look at the rule again and go, okay, where does it get triggered? If G is presenting J, that's happening in 1. That's where we would then apply the rest of the rule. J is going to go under R. But in world 2, J is not happening in G. So the rule means absolutely nothing. Like it doesn't apply. I don't care about it in the second world. It could mean that J is under R, but it doesn't mean that it has to be under R. J can do whatever it wants in relation to R. Does that make sense to everyone? Does anyone have questions about that?
So my initial thought with how I would write if I was doing by myself would be G line R. I guess that won't work. Because I was gonna do like G line R, then line J. No, I guess it won't work.
I'll be frank with you. It doesn't really matter how you write the rule, so long as it makes sense to you. So if you're writing your rule in some way that like doesn't make sense to me, I don't care, so long as you still understand that if we have J under G, we have to have J under R. And not having J under G doesn't mean anything, like nothing happens. So the way that you write your rules can be completely up to you, so long as you interpret them correctly. Generally, that's why I kind of like guide people on how to write rules, is because sometimes when you write a rule a certain way, you may interpret it wrong. But if you're interpreting it correctly, I don't care how you write it. Because you're the one that's going to be evaluating that rule and putting that rule into practice in your world. So if it makes sense to you, it makes sense to you. Does that help at all?
No, as I started talking out loud about it, I realized that the way we wrote it makes the most sense, I think, honestly.
Yeah, that's fine. If you find another way to write it out that makes sense to you, that's totally fine as well. I just don't want you to overthink it and think like there's a correct way to write it. There is like a correct way to write it, but I'm more concerned is if you interpret it correctly, if you understand the rule correctly. So there's multiple ways to write rules. Any questions? Any other questions? Sweet. Okay, so we've made the split. We've said that world 1 is where this rule is going to apply. Rule 2 doesn't have any relation to rule 1 because J is not in G. J can't go in G. We've made it so. And those are our only 2 possibilities. Now that I've had these 2 worlds, there's no way that I'm going to violate that first rule. So I've eliminated it. I don't have to think about it anymore. I don't care about it anymore. And I can move on to the second rule. When you move on to new rules, think of it like building a house or a wall or something. Like when you lay down your bricks, when you start a new layer, it's very hard to take out that bottom layer. So when we move into our second rule, I'm not going to change anything on my diagram. So they're concrete now. So if a second rule violates what I have, so let's say it said something like R or J can't go in R, I'm not going to move anything around on my diagrams. I'm just going to say this world dies or something like that. So when I move on to the new rule, it's concrete. Nothing can move around. Okay. So my second rule says if R presents on Shakespeare's villains, then W does not. What are the initial thoughts on this one? Who wants to take a stab at it?
So how I did that one is I did like a capital R lowercase s and then the arrow pointing, and then I did capital W lowercase s, and then I just put a line through it.
Works for me. That's how I would write that rule. Well, that's one of the ways you can write the rule. Another way that I would write it is RS, WS, basically the same way you wrote it, just not subscript. Same thing, just doesn't, that's kind of my point of, doesn't matter how you write the rule, as long as you're interpreting it correctly. So yeah, perfect. How could we implement this into our diagrams? Because now we have 2 diagrams. They're completely separate of one another. They're different. So when they're different, we have to treat them as independently of one another. So we have to make sure that both of those rule or worlds are following the second rule. So the way that we're going to implement it is we're going to look at world 1 and we're going to think about this rule in relation to world 1. Then we're going to think about world 2 and we're going to think about the rule in relation to world 2. So taking a look at world 1, what are my 2 options here with R presenting on S?
So R would have S,
and 1D wouldn't? Like,
Yeah. We either have R having S or R not having S, right?
mhm.
So because in world 1, I have those two options, I'm going to create that third world or that duplicate world. So I'm going to go J or G, R, W, completely copy it down. I'm going to have one where R is having S and one where R is not having S. Now I know when R is going to have S or when R is not going to have S. So that means that I can look back at that rule and I can see which one of my worlds that rule applies to. So between world 1 and world 3, where does that second rule apply?
World 1.
Yeah, because we have R presenting on S, right? So what happens in world 1?
1D can't
So
Yes, Wendy cannot. So I'm just going to go up here and say Wendy can't have S. What happens in world 3 where R does not have S?
1D could have S.
Wendy could have S, Wendy could not have S. Basically, just nothing really happens. I don't really care. I'm not forced to do anything with it. So I'm just going to leave it as is because the rule doesn't apply. Now we're going to do the same thing that we did to world 1, and we're going to do that to world 2. We're going to think about the rule and how it relates to what we have on diagram 2. So looking at diagram 2, what are my two options with R presenting on S?
Would we put like for R, put R, one world where R has S and doesn't have J, and then a world where R does not have S but still does not have J either? Like we do one world, I'm sorry, R, if R has S, then W does not have S. So a world where R has S and W does not have S. And J can't be entered either, correct? G can't have J.
Oh, are you saying like,
Am I in the wrong world?
no, we're looking at world. I think you're right. Are you saying that, oh, maybe you are looking at the wrong world? Because I'm wondering where you're getting J from.
To where G cannot have J.
Yeah, G can't have J. Why are you, if I'm understanding you correctly, why are we barring J from R and W?
I'm not.
Okay, just wanted to clarify.
Okay.
Good, because we can't. There's nothing that's saying we need to bar it.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have one where the rule does apply, where R is presenting on S.
Correct.
But we also have another world where R doesn't have S, right?
Correct.
So tell me what happens when R does have S.
When R does have S, then W cannot have S.
Yeah, I'm just gonna do a little slash up here. What about in my fourth world where R does not have S? What happens?
I mean, then we don't know.
Yeah, S can go in or out of W. We don't really care. It's not
Yeah.
forced to have anything happen. Oh, that's the rule. So when you are allowed to move on to the next rule or like move on is when you've applied it to all of your worlds. So we've applied it to our first two worlds that we had, and it created those additional worlds. There's no other world where I need to think about this rule in because I've already applied it on the two worlds that I had. Does that make sense? There's no way that in those worlds I can violate the second rule. So I can essentially erase it from my mind.
I do have a quick question.
Yes.
On world 4, why did you take S out?
Because we said that that was the world where R does not have S.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Got it. All right, thanks.
Any other questions? Okay. Almost there. Last rule says that anyone who presents on M also presents on S. What do we think about this rule?
I basically just said lowercase m equals s.
Now, when you say that, I want to make sure that you're understanding it correctly. Are you saying that it goes both ways? Like if I have S, I have M. If I have M, I have S.
No, which like I think I should use the arrow, but I just look at it as like, okay, if I have m, I'm going to have s.
Okay, good. That's what I want to make sure that you're thinking about is just because we have, or when we do have M, we're going to be forced to have S. But
It's just not the other way
yeah,
around.
Yeah, we can't necessarily say that we have to have M. So it's totally fine if you want to write it this way, if that makes sense to you. I'm going to change it to the arrow because that to me is telling me I can only go one way. Usually when I use an equal sign, to me, that means I'm going both ways.
Okay, yeah.
To you. But considering you were like, well, that I should probably change it.
Yeah, that's how I just wrote it.
That's fine. So yes, if we have M, then we're gonna have to have S. So given our 4 diagrams that we have right now, do we even see an M anywhere?
No.
I don't have any M's placed, but doesn't necessarily mean that I can't do anything with it. I would probably not think about where M could go, because if I'm thinking about where M could go, technically, well, you're going that way. Technically, if I'm like thinking about where M could go, it's leading me into like kind of this rabbit hole. But we do know something. We know things or places where S cannot go. And if we know that S can't go somewhere, that means we can't have M either, right? Because of our rule, if we have M, then we're going to have S. But if we can't have S, there's no way we could have M. Does that make sense? I'm going to take that as yes. So given in our worlds where we don't have S, what we can do is we can go, okay, in world number 1, I don't have S, means that I also don't have M. Because if I put M here, according to rule 3, I would have to put S here, and S is already barred out. So I can't have M there. I'm going to do that to all my worlds. Anywhere I have S barred out means that I have to have M barred out as well. Does that make sense to everyone? I think that's an important inference that could be made that can help progress the game a bit.
It does make sense. Thank you.
Good, good. Now, given that we have barred out where M cannot go, we can go down a rabbit hole. In world number 1, let's just focus on world number 1. Does anyone see what rabbit hole I'm thinking of?
The possibility where M can go.
We could figure that out. There's something else that I'm thinking of. And I'll give you a hint. It has something to do with the number of variables that we have.
Are you saying for all the diagrams or just?
It applies to all the diagrams, but I'm focusing on one just for simplicity.
Wouldn't we have to kill number 1 because, or maybe M can't go up under Wendy, but each person is supposed to have a topic.
Yeah.
So M would kind of have to go.
You're going down the right path. So if we know that W can't have M and it can't have S,
It has
who
to
is
have
it
J.
for? Yeah, it has to have J. And the way that we can figure this out is we only have 3 variables. And if 2 are prevented from happening, that only leaves me with 1 variable. And like you said, if there has to be someone in there, it's going to be that remaining variable. Are there any other worlds where we can figure this out?
World 2 as well, W.
Yeah, with W, because we've prevented M and S from going in there. We only have one other variable left. Where else?
4 for R.
Yeah. And then 3 already has it happening. I'm going to put a box around it just to remind myself I can't put anyone else in here. It's a solo variable in this group, basically. I think honestly, I don't know if I would do much else.
I have a question. See,
Yeah.
the problem that I'm having with these games is it's taken me entirely too long to set it up. Now, the way that I would have approached it is I would have created different worlds for all of these variables where I could have put if M then S. Like, for instance, on world 1, I would have had a world where there was M in there, then a world where there's not an M, and I would have did that for all of them. And so as a result, I have a lot of worlds, but I'm spending entirely too much time on the game setup.
So generally, if you're spending a lot of time on your game setup, it either means that you're creating worlds that aren't like progressing your game, which is kind of what it sounds like is happening with you. And it could also be a fact of you just need more practice. Speed comes with practice. So the more you practice it, the more faster you get. But with what you're telling me, how you would start that world, it creates a lot of different possibilities, because in this game in particular, you have the possibility of repeated variables. So technically, even though we've prevented M from going into W, if we were to start with just a basic diagram and you're thinking about this rule just by itself, if M then S, I've got a lot of different worlds, because M could only happen one time, M could happen 2 times, M could happen in all 3 of them.
Okay,
And so I have like, I could technically have M in all 3, or that wasn't a W, or M, or M, or
multiple different.
M only happening once in each of my
Yeah.
W's. So you're creating a lot of different worlds. And
Mhm.
even though you could then go, okay, well, then I know where my S is, just because we have M in certain places doesn't mean that S can't go in other places. So like in this world particularly, I know I would have to have S, but S could also go in R. So
Yeah.
it's not really progressing the game too much. You're just creating a lot of different worlds.
Yeah.
And if you were to start with rule number 3 as your first world or first rule that you're looking at, given that it's creating so many different worlds, I would move on to a next rule and revisit rule number 3, because as you can see, kind of keeping in mind of where did we get the S from? Oh, our second rule prevents M from going into certain places. So that kind of limits the number of worlds that you're creating then too.
Okay, thank you.
Does that kind of answer?
It does. It does. Actually, doing the worlds this way, it's different. Well, I'm seeing the proper way of doing it, and it's helped. I know for a fact I'll save a lot of time doing it this way. Thank you.
Yeah, it gets a lot of unfortunately game like mastery or like practice is the exposure and the practice of it. You're not going to get it on your first try, probably not even your second try. You're gonna have to practice it a lot. And this game, even though we're looking at this game specifically, this game has probably happened 5, 6, 7 times throughout LSAT history. These games repeat themselves. So even if this game doesn't click for you, or you feel like you've mastered this game, there could be another game that is very similar to this that has the repeated variable aspect to it that can challenge you a little bit more. So it comes with exposure to the experience of it. But going back to this game, I would probably say I wouldn't really do too much with the rest of what we got. The only thing I would probably look at is who do I have left over, or who else do I have to place somewhere? So then I can like mentally think about where I'm going to put it if I need to put it. Because if I'm thinking about where M could go, yeah, even then you're creating, what I'm thinking is M could go in G by itself. M could go in R by itself. M could go in both G and R. And then we figure out where S can go. And it's just creating a lot of worlds. And I'm not really in the mood for that. It's a lot. It's too much. And so given that, how many questions do we have in this game? Too small of a screen. We have 5 questions. Given that we don't have that many questions, if I need to, I can diagram it out to the side if I need to test an answer choice or something, but at least I have a good base diagram to start with. And I would probably just move on from here. Does anyone have questions about that? Ooh, oops. Ooh. Okay, so let's move on to our questions. Question number 1 is a list question. List questions I never use my diagram for unless I absolutely have to. List questions, I always recommend going through your rules, seeing which ones violate your rules, and then eliminating them based on the violations. That will usually get you to your correct answer the quickest and fastest way. So I'll let you take a minute to try number 19, going from rule to answer choice, and then we'll go over that with what people like.
Can you scroll back up to A and B really quick? Sorry.
Totally freaks me out.
Sorry.
Does anyone have answer choices that they like, answer choices that they're stuck between? Any that they 100% hate?
So I got rid of D and E for sure.
Okay,
I like A.
we like A. Anyone
A.
else like A?
Me.
I do as well.
Does anyone like a different answer choice? Okay. So A is going to be our answer. And we'll go through B, C, and D, or sorry, B, C, D, and E, why they're wrong. And then we can look at A and why that's correct. So can I still scroll? No, I can't. Okay, so we go through our rules to eliminate which ones are violating our rules. That's going to be it's a wrong answer choice. So rule number 1 is if G presents on J, then so does R. So if I have G and J, I'm going to have R. We're good there with B. C, we're good because G is not in J. So we don't have to worry about that. D, G is in J, so we have to have R. Means that we're not going to have this one because I don't have R. And again, E, G is not in J, the rule doesn't apply. If R presents on S, then Wendy does not. So I have R and S. Wendy's also in here. That breaks our rule. We hide B. And in our C and E, R is not even happening in S, so the rule doesn't apply. The last rule says anyone who presents on M must also present on Shakespeare. This violates, or C violates this rule because we have G and W and M. That means that we would have to have W and S, not happening. Same thing happening down here in E. We don't have R in S. So in order for this to be correct, R would have to be in S. So that leaves me with A, which follows all of our rules. G is presenting in J, means we have R. R is presenting in S, or if R presents in S, doesn't happen in this one, so it just doesn't count. And anyone who presents in M is going to present in S. So I have G and M. That means G is going to be down here, which we're good. So that is why A is our correct answer choice. And I can move this stuff. This is the part where, like, if you were stuck between answer choices or if you're not 100% confident in your diagram, we should be able to find answer choice A within our diagram. Our diagrams are set up a little bit differently, which is totally fine. Even though we have it set up differently, we should still be able to find the answer choice. So J and G and R, I already have that happening down here, so I'll work on this one. M and G, I could put M and G. Oh, I thought I changed my color. I could put M and G and S and G and W. I could do that too. Nothing's preventing me from having S and G and W. So this is a valid world. I could have that happen, which is why it's our correct answer choice. Anyone have questions about that? Okay. Next one. Which from the following cannot be a complete and accurate list of the students presenting on M? So I'll give you like 45 seconds to look at this one. And we'll go over it for the sake of time. Does anyone have any answer choice that they like, dislike, stuck between?
Like E.
You like E. Oops. Does anyone else like E? Anyone like a different one? Okay. E is our correct answer. because we're looking for something that cannot be happening. So when we're looking for something that cannot be happening, it means it's 100% false. So when you look for your answer choices, you're trying to see something that can't happen. In my opinion, that's really kind of hard to wrap your mind around. So the way that I do these cannot be trues or these negative questions, so I look for what could happen and eliminate it as an answer choice. So for example, A, we could have it be that M only appears in R. I can easily make that happen in world 1. And because I can make it happen just one time means that there's no way that it could be 100% false. So because we can make it happen, that means that A is wrong. W only, I can make that happen down here. I can put M and W and exclude M from G and R if I wanted to. And just because I can make that happen one time means that it can't be 100% false. Rules out B. G and R, again, rule number 1, I can put M in both G and R, which means it can happen once. So rule C out. And G and W, again, I can make it happen in world 3. So M, because I can make it happen at least once, can't be 100% false. That means D is wrong. But with E, I can never make that happen because an inference naturally happened. We didn't necessarily discuss it, but there's no way that M is going to be in R and W because in either world, I'm going to have it excluded from one of them at least. So in world 1, I've excluded it from W, same as 2, and then 3 and 4, I have it excluded from R. So there's no way that I can have it happen in both those worlds. Anyone have any questions on that? Okay. I'm moving on to next one. Number 21, if W presents on exactly 2 of the subjects, then which one of the following must be true? So this is, well, I'll give you like 30 seconds to 45 seconds to go over this one, and then we'll discuss it.
Can I just say something really quick?
Yep.
So this is like really hard for me to figure it out because of the way that we set up the diagrams. Because I feel like I'd be able to answer these, but since we set up the diagrams where it was like GRW and then filled it in with the presentations of MJS, the way they have it in the stems and stuff, I feel like it's the other way around. Do you get what I mean? Like I feel like they had it as MJS and then filled it in with the GRWs. So when it's like asking if Wendy presents exactly 2, I'm over here looking at the diagrams like, okay, where can Wendy go in twice? Whereas instead you have it like set up as J's and S's and M's. Do you get what I'm saying? Like it's making it hard for me to figure it out because I feel like the diagrams are switched opposite. So I don't know how to switch that thinking, or maybe since it's so hard for me, maybe I should have just set up the diagram differently.
So you can do it either way. So you could do MJS as your groups, you could do GRW as your groups. It doesn't matter in this game because they're equal number of variables. It doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
For this question, since we're looking at if W is presenting 2 of the subjects, the way that you could look at it in this kind of setup is where can I have 2 subjects in W?
Okay. So that was like, yeah, kind of my question because I didn't know how to look at it. Whereas if it was switched the other way, I would have looked for 2 W, like I would have looked for two W's instead of looking where two variables can go under W, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so then that just means that this way didn't click for you. That's why I said, like, at the beginning of this, if it's not clicking for you one way, try it with the switched way and see if that works better for you. Because if it works better for you, then I'm not worried about it. If it doesn't work better for you, or if you're still seeing that you're struggling with it, that's when I would get worried about it.
Yeah, but I wouldn't have known it didn't work for me until I got to the questions. You get what I'm saying? So like I would have done the diagrams first and I might have done it this way. But then when I got to the questions, I would have been like, oh, okay, I got to switch it, which I feel like is wasting more time because now I have to make all 4 diagrams again, but switching it. So I don't know if there's like a way to just like, so I do want to look at it from a different way instead of having to re-diagram.
Oh yeah, I'm not going to be re-diagramming.
Yeah, no, I know.
So this is one of those things where this is why we drill, is because if it's not working for you this way, then you know that next time this does happen, this way doesn't work for you, or using a certain group doesn't work for you. When you first looked at the game, if you saw it as J, M, and S are my groups, that's the way you go with it. In this game, it could be either one.
Okay, yeah. I mean, I just want to, so yeah, look at it from the diagrams we have. So you said basically look for where
so
W could have
question,
2.
Yeah, so for this question, if Wendy presents on exactly 2 subjects, if my subjects are my variables, that means that I'm going to have 2 spots, right? So it's only happening in 3 and 4 where I can have 2 spots in W.
Okay, yeah, because M and S can't go on W in the first one. So
Yeah.
that's out of the question. Okay. So yeah, so I just need to know how to approach this at first.
Yeah. So it just means that you're looking for where 2 spots could be happening. Your subjects, or the subjects of your variables that it's referring to, just means that we have exactly 2 of them in there.
Okay, so that makes more sense.
So if we know that, and I'll kind of go over this now that we're kind of getting into this rule, is if we have exactly 2 subjects in W, we're looking for something that has to be true. And if it has to be true 100% of the time, I don't even have to go through my answer choices, because what I can do is I can look at these 2 diagrams and I can see what has to be consistent. Because if it has to be true, it's going to happen in both the diagrams all the time. What is happening in both of our diagrams all the time?
Reader on J.
I think I heard it. R with J.
Yeah.
Yeah. That becomes my answer choice. That happens every single time in both of those diagrams.
Okay.
Everything else could be true, or maybe it can't be true. But since we're looking for a must be true, it's 100% of the time. I can see in my 2 diagrams what's consistent, and I can predict an answer choice. Yeah, must be true. You're looking for consistencies in the world. That's another way of putting it. Anyone else have questions?
I just wanted to say that when I was diagramming, I didn't do it this way. I did the opposite, which seems to be like would work maybe for most people here. But the way it helped me to determine which way to do is the first question. So once I saw that's how they ask it, that's how I started diagramming it. And that helped me to determine which way.
Which is fine. But in this case, it doesn't matter. You could do either one. And if you've done it correctly, you're going to get to the right answer regardless. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I do like seeing it from your perspective though, because I didn't see it at first. So that just opened my eyes like, okay, so this is the diagram and this is how you looked at it. Because I was sitting here like, I'm like, okay, this question should be easy, but it's taking me forever to get the answer. But now that you explained, just look at it this way, I get it now.
Good, good. Okay, well, let's move on to 22 for the sake of time. We have if G presents only on J, which one of the following could be true? So where can we have only G having J?
1, first world.
Could be 1
And 3.
and 3. Because in our other worlds, we can't even have J in there. So this is the only ones that happen. Okay, we can make some inferences before we even dive into the answer choices. And world number 1, if we know that G is like locked down, done, W is locked down, done, where can my M go?
R.
Has to go in R. Yep. What about world number 3? G is locked down and R is locked down. What has to go into W? What else? What are we missing?
S as well.
Yeah, S.
Oh, yeah.
So this is what I mean by taking the extra like 30 seconds or so to think about what this is like implementing or requiring from us, because now we can look at our answer choices with full worlds. And I have a feeling this will be pretty easy to kind of eliminate wrong answer choices because we have our set diagrams. These are the only 2 options that happen when G is only with J. So going through, I'm sorry, I'm rushing, but we're stuck on time. So going through A, R presents on both M and S, but not J. I'm not having that happen. I actually have to have J and R, so there's no way that we can exclude J from R. B, R presents both J and S, but not on M. Again, not happening. I have to have M when I have J and S, and in that third world, I don't have S at all, so I can eliminate that. R presents on all 3 subjects. I have that. I can have that right here because I can have all 3 of them. I would actually have to have all 3 of them. So I like that one. D, W presents on S, but on neither J nor M. I don't have that happening in either of my worlds. When I have it presenting on S, I'm going to have M. So I'm going to eliminate D. E, W presents on both J and S, but not on M. Again, not happening in either of those worlds. And that leads me to answer choice C. Does anyone have questions about that?
Nope.
Sweet. Okay, last question. If W presents on J and S, but not on M, which one of the following could be true? Where can we have that happen? Where can W present on J and S, but not M?
B.
Oh, you're saying answer choice B.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I was like, okay, we like B. Does anyone else have a like or a dislike? Okay, we'll go through this one. So when W presents on J and S, but not M, we can only have that happen in world 3 and 4. We have J and S down here. No M. So then we see which one could be true. G presents on S, but not J or M. G presents on S, but not J or M. Can't have it happen because I would have to have in this, well, that doesn't really apply to this world, but in the 4th world, while I could have S here, it would mean that I would be forced to have M here because I can't put it in R or W and would have to go there. And same in world 3, if I put S here, I'm gonna have to be stuck with J. So that creates A is wrong. G presents on M and S, but not J. Okay, that's exactly what we kind of created. And in number 4, S and M are in G. We're not having J, so that could happen. And G presents on J and S presents on, or sorry, G presents on J and S, but not on M. Can't have that happen because even if I put J and S here, where am I gonna put my M? I gotta put my M somewhere. It would have to go into G. R presents on J and M, but not S. No, in both of my worlds, I'm gonna have to have J and only J and R, so we can eliminate that. And that also eliminates E, R presenting on all three subjects. Again, we can only have J happening there. Okay. Anyone have questions on this one? Anyone have questions in general?
Do you do this every week or?
Yeah, every Wednesday at this time. So whatever this time is for you. It's 5 p.m. Central Time for me. So
Okay, and then what was, because I saw this off the Facebook group, but I couldn't find the post again to like sign up. What's the website so I can just like go to it every week and sign up?
oh yeah, let me get it for you. So I have them planned out through the end of next month, so through the end of June. And I usually do about a month in advance that I plan them out. So right now you can sign up for through the end of June, and then usually like the second to last week, I'll start planning the next month.
Okay. And is it changed or is it always logic games?
I always do logic games at this time. But Nicole does LR, I think Saturday mornings.
Okay, yeah, I saw that one too. And that's on the same website to sign up for you, right?
Yeah, so the link that I got has all of the classes that we're offering.
Okay, perfect. I'll see.
Denise, what question?
Like the questions that you went over tonight, if you could just like take a screenshot and like post it either in the Facebook group or on the blog or something. Just so I can have like quick reference, because I got tied up when you started scrolling because I don't have it pulled up separately.
Oh, it was PT.
I have a list and I have it written down for the next month, like all the classes that you have going. But
So it's PT82 game 4. I can't post like the questions because LSAC's got a huge
I
copyright
forgot
on it.
about that. And it's actually there. Yeah, got it.
Yeah, so but this is recorded. So you could go back, watch the recording.
I'm gonna watch it at least 3 or 4 more times because it made my head hurt. So thank you so much for that.
No problem. I usually send out, the rest of my night is booked with tutoring, so I might send out the link to the video tomorrow.
And so everybody can be happy again.
But I usually send out like the link to the video link within like 24 hours or so. So
Okay. All right. Thanks so much.
great, no problem. Any other questions?
If she was needing the practice test, I can email it to her. She drops her email in the chat if that's what she was looking for.
I actually have them. I have so many resources, but I'll definitely take it. So I'm gonna send that now. So I'm pretty sure that I have them, but I don't want to say I have it and then I don't. I think I have some of the older tests. And I know we're gonna be going over.
Yeah, so I usually try to do the newer tests just because they're more, I don't want to say they're more like accurate or representative because they really have not changed a whole lot. But if you get Law Hub, you will have access to like all the prep tests, and that is only
That's the $99 one, right?
the what?
Does it cost $99 for that one?
For the year, yeah. So any other questions? Okay, well, like I said earlier, oh, you're welcome. Like I said earlier, this is every Wednesday evening, 5 p.m. Central Time, so you might have to do some math for time zone conversions. But the link is to sign up for future classes is in the group chat. Other than that, I will see y'all next week, hopefully.
For sure. Have a great week.
All right, bye guys.